Welcome to episode 5. I hope you guys are doing great. It's Friday, February 5th, 2021. So let's dive into some housekeeping. The first thing I want to talk about is field. So I have had some questions about field, and some people are concerned about not being able to meet the minimum hours. That is non-negotiable. 40 hours is mandatory. I need you guys to make sure that you plan out your days so that you can spend as much time as possible in the classroom. So, looking at it today, we have 3 weeks left in February, 4 weeks in March, kind of a blender week between March and April, and then 3 more weeks in April, giving you a total of 11 weeks, including finals week, to get your 40 hours in. That's over 50 school days, which means that you guys may have to go once or twice a week, spend a couple hours here just to get your hours in. If you have to go for 2 hours on a Friday that wasn't scheduled, that you're not planning on testing, that's okay, but get your hours in. Now let's talk about the lessons. You guys are required to write 7 lessons for the grade level that you're in. Before you start writing these lessons, I would talk to your teacher and see what they're comfortable with you teaching in their classroom. Somebody has told me that there was a teacher that was concerned about state testing and maybe only letting them teach 1 lesson. So my response to that is take your time, get to know your teacher. Maybe as they get to know you and see that you're a good guest and a respectful guest and willing to work and help them, they will be more willing to let you teach some lessons. Then once you kind of get a feel for where they are, go ahead and ask what they would like for you to plan, even if you're not going to use it. Just tell them that you need practice and you want it to be in alignment with what they're working on so that maybe they can look at your lesson plans and kind of pick their brain a little bit. I think it's important when you're in these situations that you collaborate with veteran teachers. Even if they're not using all of the new best practices that we're using, they do have just a treasure trove of experience that you guys need to try to pick up on as much as you can. All right, next, let's talk about mini lessons. There were some issues with the first round as far as students not meeting the minimum time limit. That is concerning. Remember that you have to have 10 minutes of original content, meaning that if you have a 10-minute 1-second video and 4 minutes of that is a YouTube video that you've integrated into your own lesson, that doesn't count as your 10 minutes. I need you guys to teach for 10 minutes. That's not a lot to ask, to teach 10 minutes every 2 weeks. Okay, next up, show, don't tell. I can read your lesson plans. I don't need you guys to go through and read them to me. I want you to show me what your classroom will look like, what you look like in front of the classroom. The example I posted from Megan this week was really good about differentiating in the classroom for different learning styles, different ability levels, and acting like you're the teacher. I know that maybe some of you are having trouble with the environment, and the environment may hold you back a little bit, but if you pretend that you're in the front of the classroom and act like you're having interactions with kids, that will prepare you for actually being in the classroom. And it helps me kind of critique your teaching style and little things that may make your classroom a little more efficient and help your classroom management. A lot of you guys saw comments where I was asking you to have your things written down so that you didn't have to have your back to the camera. When you have your back to the camera, that means that your back would be to your students. And when you're not watching your students, that's when bad things happen. I'm not saying like terrible things, but disruptions and horseplay and basically not being focused and engaged on a lesson. Those are things that are going to get dinged by your administrator in the future when you're doing your teacher evaluations. That, and make sure that you have a technology piece in every lesson. So with that, I want to dive into this week's questions. Okay, let's dive into your questions of the week. First one from Marissa. Do you use an idea like the math menus mentioned in the book within your classroom? If so, what are some ways we can use the math menus in other subjects so that students have options when completing assignments? One thing that I did in my math classes was I used, it's kind of like math menus, but it was centers. So once we got through the day's lesson, if the kids had finished their assignment, they were able to pick a center. So they had MobyMax, which had like gap bridging stuff, and they were able to work on that. They had extensions, they had logic puzzles, they had different hands-on projects that they could select. We also did like mousetrap cars if they wanted to. So it was one of those things where I kind of incorporated maker spaces, technology, and kids' creativity, and allowed them to do whatever they felt comfortable with after we had kind of worked our way through the content. I think that this is a really good idea. You maybe call them assignment menus, where kids can go through and they can talk, or if you're teaching English, they could select what kind of project they're going to do, just to show that they understand the content that you've just delivered. Next up, Caitlin. What have you found is the best way to use manipulatives in class without them turning into toys or a distraction? Well, so it's really important that you use manipulatives. It's just you don't want to overexpose them, meaning that the shorter amount of time you use the manipulatives, the better. So if you could do it in 10-minute blocks, that's wonderful. Especially when you're first introducing them, 5 or 10-minute blocks, and then let kids start getting used to them as tools. They're successful, and then success breeds success, and you can start increasing the amount of time that you're using the manipulatives, letting kids work with them in groups or work on things by themselves. The next one, how do you deal with or reassure a student who needs math intervention that feels dumb or far behind compared to his peers? What are ways to let them know everyone works at different paces and different subjects come more easily to different people? This is a very relevant question, and it's one thing that I had to work with a lot. We talked about brain differences. We talked about differences in speed as far as running. We talked about differences in people in strength, and just kind of compared that to thinking, because our brains are a muscle, and if somebody's faster than you running, odds are somebody's going to be faster than you at doing other things. And it's kind of normalizing them and normalizing the fact that differences are okay, and then finding ways to encourage them to find workarounds for their difficulties. So if you have a kid that struggles to do things in writing, let them type. Encourage them to type. Let them know that that's one of their strengths. If you have kids that struggle to do other things, find a workaround and then encourage them to do that. I think that's really all I have. So let's go to the next section. Now, I want to talk about participation in these discussions. Right now, I have only got 2 of you who are participating. I need participation in posting questions of the week from every student each week. So please get your questions posted for episode 6, and I will answer those next week. So I want to wrap up with this. I'm not going to be too lengthy today because I have included a podcast that I want you guys to listen to over the weekend or into next week as part of the content for this course. It's a podcast on teaching during COVID. I think it's pretty relevant, especially with all of our schools nationwide that are struggling to reopen, and with you guys going into classrooms for field. So give it a listen. Stay safe. God bless.